So go ahead. There you go, Elsie. She's got it. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Can Do Links to Learning. This is the last Tuesday of the month. I hope we had a good month together, and I think we're going to end in such a good way with today's guest speaker. I'm so glad you're here, honored you're here. It always feels good when we get to gather together, learn together, share stories, hear stories, be inspired, build our capacity together. So welcome, welcome to Can Do Links to Learning. My name is Michelle. I'm joining from the sunny Amiskwaciwa sky again. So it's sunny today. It's definitely a fall day. That chill is in there. You know, winter. You know that season is coming, the snow is coming, but nonetheless, we give thanks for the gift of another day that Creator walks with us. We never walk alone. We always have our ancestors. We always have that community, that circle to lean on for support and to offer and to lend our gifts. So we're so thankful for this day, this moment. Thankful for all the good gifts that Creator has given to us as we walk our journey and we, do our thing in Creator's world. So to that we say, hi, Creator, for this moment. All right, so you are joining the webinar of Weaving Two Worlds, Economic Reconciliation between Indigenous Peoples and the Resource Sector. So today, you're going to engage in conversation and personal stories to offer practical skills and tips on how to build meaningful, mutual, productive relationships with Indigenous peoples. From initial consultation to project planning and development, and show how the resource sector can play a meaningful role in advancing reconciliation with Indigenous peoples as part of a sustainable future that benefits all of humanity. I am here for it all. So reconciliation is such a topic that we've been talking about for years, and we will continue to talk about for years. So I think that this is a really good conversation that's happening today. Thank you so much to our guest speaker, Christy Smith. She's a member of Comox First Nation. So she's living in her traditional territory on Vancouver Island. I am so jealous. Christy has authentically navigated both Indigenous and non-Indigenous worlds while working in the resource sector for over, drum roll please, 25 years. Her work is deeply rooted in reconciliation and decolonizing the approach to ways of doing business. So engaging and building good relations are at the core of what Cindy does as a changemaker, mentor, liaison, project manager, engagement expert, and a powerhouse. She has facilitated workshops, presented at national mining conventions, instructed at universities, de-escalated complex situations, which is a huge skill, mentored Indigenous entrepreneurs, negotiated countless benefits agreements, advocate on behalf of First Nation governments and industry proponents, and build capacity within every organization of which she has been part. And today that's what she's really helping us to do, just to build capacity with the knowledge and her experience and her stories. So we honor your presence. We honor the gift of your knowledge that you're bringing to the table today. Thank you so much for being here, Christy. You're also a wife and a mother. You currently serve as a partner and vice president for the Indigenous and Stakeholder Relationships with a company in Vancouver. I mean, this woman has so much to bring to the table today. I'm still reading her bio. There's so much in there. She's recently authored Weaving Two Worlds, so what she's going to talk about today. So thank you so much for being here. We are very honored to have you in our midst. So I'm just going to pass this virtual mic over to you. Everybody else who's joined, we invite you to use that chat box, use those reaction signs at the bottom. This is an opportunity for you also to engage, bring some good questions to the table. So we're honored that all of you are here. So welcome to our afternoon with Can-Do's Links to Learning. Christy, the mic, I'm passing it over to you.
Thank you. I always love your openings. I'm like, ooh, I'm all that. That makes me excited. Give me a boost at 2:00 in the afternoon. Yeah, so thank you everybody for being here. I appreciate um everybody's attendance, and I really want to have like a super engaging conversation today. So I would love some audience participation and questions and things like that, because I think I'm going to briefly touch on some really key pieces, but these are pieces that we can like deep dive into them. So yeah, there should be a note. I'll just say a little bit more about myself. I am a mother of 9. So if at any time their child runs into my room and whatever else that is the case, so I sort of sit on the side and yeah. And anyways, it tends to be a little bit hectic sometimes, but I will, it's all organic and it's so important to have these conversations. So I'm very excited. I'm going to share a PowerPoint if that's okay, team. And hopefully I can just do this really quickly. And I will, let's go like this. Hopefully it works. Nope, it's going to go on a different side. 2 seconds. Technical difficulty right here.
As
It's not.
she's getting set up, Elsie, do you want to maybe shoot her a message in the chat box, give her a hand somehow, or have you been made co-host, Christy?
Like all the things on it. So you should see like my whole presentation down the side.
Yes.
That's fine. We can talk. This is important. So we can totally like just move back and forth between the slides. Yeah, I want to try to show 2 screens, so forget it. So yeah, I over COVID got bored. I was homeschooling multiple children, learning Spanish and chemistry and things that I didn't actually learn in high school. And I decided to co-author with a really good friend of mine, Michael McPhee, a book called Weaving Two Worlds, economic reconciliation between Indigenous peoples and the resource sector. So like Michelle said, I've been working in the sector for 25 years. I made a recent joke and I don't think anybody laughed at me, but I said, you know, I've been in, actually, I should say that I have this knowledge for 46 years, because as we all know, our ancestors gift us this knowledge from our blood, from our birth. And so, although that looks like I'm really old on a resume or on a bio, so I have to keep it down to how long I've worked in the resource sector. But my colleague Michael McPhee and I have known each other for approximately 10 to 15 years in the industry, and always sort of like, he's been asking me a ton of questions. I've learned a lot from him. I've had to like learn to keep my mouth shut sometimes when he's explaining how the proponent might feel, or the industry people, or what we're bound to by law. And so we decided we would co-author and really have these 2 voices played out back and forth in a book. So if you haven't read the book, by all means, it actually is applicable to not just the resource sector. There's like techniques and discussions and stories that could be relevant to any circumstance. I just talked to government. They found it quite useful. So that was sort of how it all came about. We started at the beginning of COVID. I think I delayed it really long, being that he had such a really good way of writing and typing and being able to put words on a piece of paper. And I would write one sentence, look at it, think about what my grandma would say, and then have to like reiterate and recreate my pieces to make sure that what I was saying would be appropriate. Because, and this goes down to sort of one of the fundamental things that I talk about in my book, is this whitewashing approach. of like, oh, she's First Nations, so this must be all First Nations voices. And it isn't. It's definitely my voice. But when you're writing something that's always been an oral form of your life, to put it into words put me in a place of like extreme stress and vulnerable moments. But anyways, here it is. I think I'll write another book, and it would totally be fiction, and I'll make some murder mysteries up or something if I'm gonna write again. But this is the outcome. So I'm happy to kind of walk through a few chapters today of like pieces that I think we could have some dialogue around. And then yeah, but I really want to have some interaction with the crew that's here. So why is this important? Why do we need to talk about this? What we're seeing across Canada, especially with the integration of UNDRIP and the reconciliation plans and truth and reconciliation calls to action, is finally the integration of Indigenous knowledge and Western science, and sort of that like amalgamation of the weaving that's beginning. And so this is super important to have some fundamentals as we go through the process. It's not saying, you know, here's how to write. So we do a lot of environmental assessments. So how to write a chapter that interweaves Indigenous knowledge and Western science. It gives you the tools to recognize bias. It gives you the tools to recognize you're putting some myths into your writing. So it's a bit more of like a first step approach. Super important to kind of break through some of those pieces so that you are coming from a place of good. And so that was fundamentally why I felt that this book was really important, because there's a ton of books out there that talk about you know, the how to and sort of some of that pieces, but they don't ever actually tell you to look inside. And so our book is a lot of pre-work about like internal bias and self-reflection. So I'm going to talk a little bit about self-reflection, and then we're going to stop there. And I want to have a little bit of interaction. Hopefully people are able to like take away from their work and actually have a conversation. But the first chapter in the book is about self-reflection. And I think it's one of those pieces that is fundamentally forgotten about in general life. We don't necessarily go, okay, we're going to go engage in a First Nation community. I'm just going to take the day to self-reflect, or I'm going to, even myself, like I'm going to go start a meeting or even have a dialogue like today and not do any self-reflection on how I'm showing up. And I think like Michelle, you come in like a bomb and you're beautiful and you have so much energy, but I know that you've taken a moment to like self-reflect and how you're going to show up, and those pieces are super important regardless of the circle, regardless of our conversations with others. It even like comes down to the like, you know, how we're showing up for our children and our adults and elders and etc. So the first chapter really is about looking inwards and setting a place up on how you want to be presenting yourself. So the first step, you can see I've just kind of copied the first page of my first chapter, but it's like know thyself. Know how, like where you're going into, you know what kind of place you're coming in from. So if you've had a really horrible week, you know, those are really important things to have, like, you know, an understanding of as you're going into an engagement circle or an engagement space. I think we've seen a lot of conversation in regards to privilege. We've heard the term about, you know, a place of privilege, a place of white privilege. I know I've had people cringe when I say that, but it's those are true things. Those are pieces that you want to ask yourself no matter what. I come into communities and I do like traditional land use planning and socioeconomic work, and I've been doing it for 25 years. Sometimes I'm coming in to those circles, if I don't self-reflect with a place of privilege, you know, or a thought that I don't even know that I'm doing. And so this doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means we're all human, and we really want to recognize like how you come to the table. Are you coming from a place of guilt? So a lot of the clients I've been working with in the last like couple years are coming into spaces in a place of guilt. I mean, with the residential school findings and all of that. I've got clients that are Catholic that are engaging, and they come in with so much guilt in them and so much like it's just not a great place to begin a relationship, is a place of guilt. So we really try to take a step back and work with just the self-reflection piece. Are you coming in onto the table with a place of assumptions, stereotypes? All of these things can cause harm in the relationship and harm in the engagement and harm in the space. So really having to check yourself at the door. So unconscious bias. So my book talks a lot about unconscious bias and beliefs that we carry with us. Certain things of, I know a lot of times, you're coming into a table and you may assume. So here's a really interesting story. So I don't know how many people are from BC, but I'm from BC. And the Tahltan Nation are like an amazing group of individuals that and historically have been mining as long as they've existed, because that was their area of expertise. And so when we come to the table with the Tahltan, the proponents that come to the area may be a geo, maybe somebody that assumes that they're not talking to people that understand mining, and really you are talking to like mining engineers, like people that have gone to school and come back to do this kind of work in their territory, because that's the economic possibility in their territory. So really understanding like who's at your table is super important. We can't make the assumption that you're all knowing and coming in and that the table doesn't know anything. Truly coming into a place in an engagement sphere or circle, you have to come from a place of being humble, that you're going to learn something that day, that you're going to, it just has to be a step back. So I'm just going to stop there. And I really want to like open the door to questions on this subject, because we are so busy in life that we forget to do this, and it can harm people and harm the environment and harm the engagement sphere. And so I think it's a super important part to have a little bit of dialogue about and answer any questions and share stories. Like, you are welcome as participants on this call to share a story of a scenario that you may have run into this, or a question on how to deal with something. So I'm just going to open it up and see if anybody has any questions. I can't see anybody, so.
So if you do have a question, feel free to use that chat box, or not even question, even a comment. Use the chat box or unmute yourself. You are welcome to come in and lend your voice. We love hearing from you.
Everybody's like, not today. It's a Tuesday.
I love what you're saying, though. I always, in my language, which I find I didn't say today, but normally I say this, press pause. Like, I think that is so important for us to do, press pause and just take that moment of inward reflection. So I really, really honor what you say, how that's really important for us to learn to do when we do come to the places of having these conversations. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we got nobody that wants to participate in the conversation. All right, too bad I can't pick on anybody. it's hard to get people to open up. Yeah. And it's an awkward conversation, but it's super cool to start with. And I think we forget to do it no matter what area we're working in or what area we like whatever area you work in as a company or whatever area you're working in, or even as an Indigenous person. So I support my community and sit on some tables and have people come in and I'm like, oh, I wish I just told them to like have that moment of like reflection, because you're gonna get kicked out of here. And I've got pretty strong aunties, and most of the time they get the oust, and I almost like feel like I need a pre-meeting with anybody that's going to come in the Comox store before, because it tends to, yeah, you need to check yourself. All right.
Yeah, hello. Well, I guess
Okay. Yes.
yeah. I was reading the chat there. But anyway, hola. Buenas tardes. I think I would be coming from a place of assumptions and stereotypes because of the toxicity that's revolving within the community. Even my home community, everyone's always just ready to judge you, assume something with every little word that comes out of your mouth, especially if you're uh, speaking in public, right? Like if you're addressing the audience, everybody's only just has selective hearing because of they're looking for key words that'll trigger people. So you always have to be on your toes from how you respond, trying not to react, and it's pretty hard, especially if you're reaching out, trying to connect to one or two people, and if you have those one or two people that are not the right people to be connecting with, their narrative is going to be totally different, and the context is going to be way out from left field from what you were trying to address, convey. So just being very vigilant on how you approach certain people, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. That was extremely, those are extremely important things to say. And I commend you for going first, because that's always difficult too. I think, yeah, you being judged is hard, and that is, you're being judged by someone who hasn't done that self-reflection piece, right? And that is out of your control. What I've sort of practiced with, and I don't know if this will help you or maybe it'll help someone else, but I try to always say, this is my opinion, this is my feelings, and try to like ground them in humbleness. And it's tough because people get quite jolted if they think you're speaking for them as well. And so it's a really hard space to be in, but honesty and humbleness and really like doing that self-reflection takes you that much farther down the line with that relationship than you would be if you kind of bulldoze through the door and made those assumptions and had those biases, and there's biases that are unconscious. So we like, that's what we do as humans. It's a human response, is to think of something or to compare or you know, um, one of my children is one of my stepsons is adopted, and he's both Indigenous and Black, so he is like very dark. And everywhere we go, the kids are with us, and if his hoodie's above his head, the store owners quickly like reach over to him and tell him to take his hoodie off. But I don't know if all the other kids would have had the same response. And so we have these unbiases and these microaggressions, I guess we would call them, in society that just exist. And so the only way to slowly make change is for us to all like work through some of our biases and try to show up in the best way we possibly can. There was I just wanted to answer or talk about the term like the white savior, and like how there's a couple elements there, because I think it's really important to talk about. I'm not going to lie, there are individuals, and I think they come from a place of guilt or saviorism, where we go into a space and it's very driven by not the community. It's driven by a consultant, and they're not Indigenous, and we tend to term those as that white saviorism aspect of they're trying to save the community, and there's passion there, possibly there could be just ties to money. So there's a bunch of different scenarios that I've seen across the 25 years I've been working, and it's really hard now that we're in a space of reconciliation sometimes to determine like how that person is showing up, and where they're coming from. I think like there's a lot of work we need to do, or society needs to do in the form of reconciliation. And then how is it received from the other side? Sometimes I can tell you, like, my family's like, what the heck? Like, we don't need that. We don't need you. Like I had an individual come talk to me, and one of my cousins, we were doing a talk about the Comox Nation, and they're like, can we help you in any way? We want to like join a committee to like bring you up. Can we put like a donation jar at the local store to support the nation? And it was the most bizarre conversation I've had. And it was that place of unknowing, obviously, but it was, that the perception that they could save us. And a donation jar at the local store is like, I felt like saying, we're not the SPCA. But it was, those were true stories and true scenarios. And it's really hard for people to know what to do for reconciliation. I'm really interested in all the companies that are truly developing a collaborative reconciliation action plan with the nations that they work with. You'll see some really strong pieces come out of that if it truly is a collaboration. That includes a collaboration between the nation, and where we have a bit of struggle with is like municipalities. We're a very urban Indigenous community. We've got several municipalities that surround us, and so how do we work together, and instead of people having donation jars at their stores? So there's that piece. It's going to evolve. Like, we're just kind of touching the surface of some of that in respect to reconciliation and reconciliation. And so I think we're going to start to see some really strong examples that we can use and see and I guess evolve from. But I just wanted to make mention of that. I know there's more chats, and I'm going to have to oops, I just have to scroll up. Is there anything that's come in? Sorry. All right. I don't know if I missed a question. Michelle, are you looking at the questions as well?
Yeah, there's not really,
Just comments?
yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I'm actually going to keep going. I just wanted to stop there. One of the biggest things that we never know is who our audience is and who we're speaking to. So I don't want to stick on a topic. I think there's more stuff that we can talk about or learn. And so we'll just continue on this. The big other thing that I wanted to touch base on today was on educating yourself. So a lot of times, and I guess for chapter 2, this is really what it talks about is doing the work, doing the front work. And this comes a lot from my community and my teachings, is that they really like to not have to continually educate at the table. It's kind of nice when someone comes in and has a bit of background and is like, oh, we didn't know, or things like that they could actually find on the website. And then I think it can be a little bit difficult to understand what to educate yourself with. And with now everything that we've seen in the last couple of years with UNDRIP, all that information, at the bare minimum, our hope is that proponents in the resource sector and government have done their due diligence to understand the current political structure of what is happening in Canada, what is happening on a macro level, and what's happening on a smaller level, within the community. So, if you are going out to a specific community that, you understand, maybe when the election is. So for us right now, we're headed right into nominations, we're going into election. It's not always the easiest time to come and establish a relationship if leadership might change in a month. So really understanding the community and the history, and the culture and the people, and understanding that a pan-Indianism approach is not appropriate. So those are sort of the high level fundamentals of educating yourself. So just quickly, I'll highlight a few things. You don't need to know everything. That's one thing people start to get nervous about, is not knowing everything about the nation or about things, because it's okay to ask questions. I did a talk locally just recently, and I asked everyone, it was non-indigenous, I asked everyone if they've actually gone to the reserve. We're in an urban center, so I asked everyone if they had actually been to our reserve, and nobody had. And yet they drive through it every single day and have never stopped. And there's, obviously other things that they could stop and look at, but it shocked me. And when we started digging into the whys, it was fear. Well, I don't know if that's appropriate. I didn't know if I was allowed to just stop. I wasn't allowed if I could stop and ask a question or things like that. And so it was really interesting that there, as much as we want to educate ourselves and, as proponents or government, you're educating yourself. It's okay to come and ask the questions as well, and feel comfort, I guess, in asking those questions. I think that's a missed opportunity to ask specifics. So, and there's things that are obviously not going to be on the website, what's culturally appropriate for gifting, or the process for decision making, process for our referral systems, and who's responsible for referral systems in the community, because that differs depending on the community. So all those things are important. And not speaking for any other community, but for my community specific and the communities I work for, we find there's more value engaging with those that ask than those that just assume or don't ask, because it just streamlines things, and it gives us comfort in that people want to understand and want to understand the history and the culture and etc. So I am going to just quickly skip past a few slides that I didn't think would be relevant today, but I really want to talk about how to engage. So one of the things that I find interesting is going back to that, not like engagement 101, like how a community wishes to be engaged, or how, and I can take this in both ways, how we engage the general public, or how the government and extractive resource engage with communities. And there are a ton of resources out there that, like engagement 101, how to engage, things like that. And I think the most important one, of course, is your commitment to engagement. Are you committed to the time that's necessary? Are you, is the the other engagement group willing to put in the time? So here's and this is where I find it interesting, especially in the work I do, is we hit a project wants to start moving forward, but that seems to be the time people start engaging, which is almost too late. Well, it is too late. And so we see people scrambling, and then there's a schedule in place because it kicks into like a bunch of scheduling processes, an environmental assessment process, etc. So now your engagement process is bound by a schedule, and time is such a colonial construct. And so the scheduling piece, if you can engage before you have to schedule anything, that is the time to engage. Starting early. There's probably a million books out there, a million talks out there, people out there that'll say do it early, build that trust. One of the things that we see lots of is that individuals will engage, but they just want to talk about the project. Any moment of breath or silence, they're like, oh, but my project, but we need to do this, or we're sitting at a caribou table, we need to talk caribou. It's even more than that. Nobody's taking the time to actually develop that relationship, to develop that trust. I'm not really going to tell you, my Indigenous interest on a specific subject if I don't have that relationship with you. Nor do I want to spend the time explaining why that's important to me. So that's a really, really important piece that is sort of missed, is that building the trust and engaging on generally as a human being, and not necessarily on a project. Now that might differ depending on your nation, because some people are so busy, and we've got, we're all cost recovery, sort of working to try and have our natural resources, staffed up, but they're too busy to actually engage unless they want to speak of the project. They just want to do it that way, that you kind of have to ask a few questions to figure that out. But on the whole, if you're making a relationship and you are a long-term player in the region, then you should be having those personal relationships and the trust built over time. So that's just sort of a key. I've seen both pieces, but that's also the part about asking questions, is determining if there is time and to build that relationship with as well. Recognizing capacity as a whole, again, speaking kind of as we're looking at natural resources departments, and we're all different sizes, is there an ability to engage frequently, or is this can you set up a process of how you would engage moving forward, and it might be every quarter you're checking in. Those are okay. Are pieces that are okay as well. I guess asking, making sure that you are speaking to the right person is a big one. So you may be going in I just had it recently, had this situation come up where a company was engaging with an individual that said they represented the community and they didn't, and have multiple dinners and hockey games under their belt, and with the realization from the company that they were engaging in developing a relationship with somebody that actually is not a decision maker. So I've seen that actually multiple times over my last however many years in the resource sector, where we tend to see a lot of like whining and dining occur, and it's not necessarily with the right people. So really getting to know the community and asking those questions and finding out who the people you should be engaging with is really important. So again, asking questions and making sure that, so a lot of times also in the resource sector, what I'm finding, and it's changed over the last 10 years, trust me, but before we had a lot of like token positions. And to be frank, I've had multiple jobs that I've left because I had no ability to do anything in the position. I was just the token liaison. And I had no ability to kind of do anything. And so that needs to be, I guess, looked at in respect that you need to be working with a company, a resource company, or engaging with a resource company that's truly committed to their engagement policy, to their planning, that give that position the ability to engage, and not just sort of a position. The ability to engage at different levels. So sometimes you might have a liaison that's connecting and doing work with the ECDev department because they're building up opportunities. But, you know, for the political high level, like other discussions, it may be a different table that sits together. So understanding different levels of governance essentially is really, really important. And that can actually make or break you depending on who's at the table. Yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I would highlight on how to engage or things that might pop up that are going to be detrimental. Yeah, just that relationship piece. And then and really going back in this chapter, I do talk a lot about that self-reflection and like, okay, you've got certain, you know, examples and stories of how it's going to possibly be derailed, such as, you know, being tied to a schedule and things like that, or not enough. A lot of times I'm finding that there's no budget provided to the liaison positions in some of these, you know, companies. And so if there's no budget or there's no ability to like really provide some capacity or engage on certain things or understand, like spend that time to understand the interests and concerns of the community and the community needs as themselves. I did a talk a couple of weeks ago with Michelle on like the work I do, which is like really socioeconomic based and community based indicator work, where we look at like the indicators that are community based. Like, so if you don't understand all those pieces, the engagement piece becomes quite difficult. It's kind of like if you're going to marry somebody, you better figure out who they are. And then also working on that relationship as you progress and as you grow and change and be able to be adaptable and innovative. And what's one thing that I think is missing in this engagement piece is it's very processed. It's become a sort of like you know, we engage because of this is the schedule, this is the referral or permitting, and I'm only speaking resource at this time, but there's a lack of ability to have like innovative relationships or ways to and this is why I'm really interested in this, you know, the reconciliation planning that's coming out of the collaborative the collaborative reconciliation plans, because we're going to move into a space of engagement, but engagement plus innovation of like how true reconciliation is really going to look. And that's just an evolving practice in an area that I think is going to be, it should be, I mean, it should be exploding, and everybody should be like trying to see how we can move past some of these things that have been stagnant for so long. So yeah, the engagement piece is super important, but it's super important not just to do it as like a checkbox exercise or a thing that you do off the side of your desk, that you're really like creating a safe space for dialogue, that you're, you know, collaboratively coming up with reconciliation plans, and that you look to the innovation before you look to what would be considered more of the norm. So a lot of times, so one of the things that we've really identified on a project I was just recently on is the community's done with the normal. They really want to focus on some other aspects that are more of their interest, that could be like it would benefit the community more, and nobody's really asked, right? So I think those are really important. I'm just going to read the chat. There was for programs called Men and Women Talking, programs of Indigenous and non-Indigenous talking would be a good start. Is there an available format for that? Would such program be helpful? Yeah, absolutely. I think, and maybe I'm taking this question the wrong way, but I think what I find is that we all come from a sense of space and a place when we're having dialogue and talking. And so it's maybe I've already answered it, but sometimes it's really difficult to like, well, everybody's coming from a different space, right? So Indigenous, non-Indigenous, man, woman, you know, two-spirited, etc. So understanding that space is super important, but I agree with you that, you know, programs and some format and teaching, and it would be really, really key. I hope I answered that question. Please correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. But I think that the perception and where you're coming from at the table, every single person would come from a different space. And so how do you, it does take a really good facilitator to maneuver around that. But in a lot of our discussions that we have on a day-to-day basis isn't facilitated. And sometimes that can cause problems as well. You just have to have really, really strong, a strong facilitator at the table. I'm not sure if I answered that question. I'll lean on you, Michelle, if anything else comes in. So I just wanted to talk about one more thing that's in the book before I stop and answer any of the questions that I possibly can in our short little time. And it's about allyship. Now, we're using the term allyship right now. I'm sure there'll be a new term coming up that, you know, talks about how to like basically perform reconciliation and how you come into that space. I'm going to use the word allyship because I like it. I know that I've heard a lot of like back and forth about the term and whether or not it's the acceptable term. But I do like the fact that, you know, you're not coming in as a white savior, or you're not coming in as, you know, from a place of guilt. You're not coming from all these things. You're coming into the space of allyship. So, and that I feel is like that first fundamental piece of reconciliation when you're doing the work and engaging with community. And then the opportunity of Indigenomics. I shout out to Elsie. We get to go to Indigenomics next week, right? Yeah. So Caroline Hilton, she's from the island as well. She's a wonderful, wonderful woman. So she's got her Indigenomics. I guess it would be her. It's a she Indigenomics next week. So that's the idea that we're all sitting at the table and we have a huge ability and massive economy that Indigenous communities can play a role in. And it's definitely an area that can grow exponentially. And in fact, I think I was reading something like if we can grow the GDP by like, I don't remember the full amount, but it was like an extraordinary amount for the GDP of Canada to like if we start engaging Indigenous communities at the table and etc. And so this is also an area that's growing in dialogue and growing in discussion. You're starting to see major projects that are developed from an equity standpoint. I mean, most of the negotiations that I do right now and support the negotiations on are all equity based. We don't have a lot of like, oh, there's some employment and a little bit of this and a little handout, there you go. We're really seeing true equity in these agreements, equity ownership, communities starting to take a fuller approach to what's in the traditional territory than before. Now I'm speaking mostly from a BC perspective, because I know that there's been some really good examples across Canada in the last little while. But the ones that I've been working on have been in BC, and for those that are not from BC, the land is land's unceded across Canada, but the land has never been put into a treaty form for the majority of BC, and so causes a little bit of ups and downs and some issues when we're trying to like have some of this dialogue. But it's definitely a changing landscape. It's not always a fine line or a clear line as it is in some other provinces, but the place at the table is huge, and it's changing. And like maybe 10 years ago, sometimes I was thinking, do I really have another 20 years of work? Like, is it going to keep going? And in the last 10 years, in the involvement of like Indigenous folks in all spheres and communities and like the companies that are coming out. I mean, the Micmac was a really, really good example of like how they have now like they've got the largest I'm gonna botch it, but anyways, it's just the amazing stories and how communities are resilient and coming out and playing a part in the economy is super impressive. And that's truly changed and has changed quickly. Like, so it's evolved quite slowly over time, but in the last, like, I would say 5 years, we've seen such a shift in the Canadian economy and how we're engaging and things like that. So super important. I think there's going to be a ton of new insight and new things coming out, and I'm super privileged to be here today and to talk about it. I am super passionate about it. I don't think I'd ever would have put my verbal words into a book unless I was, but yeah, I'm going to stop there. It's 5 minutes. I've been watching the time. There's 7 chapters that I wrote in the book, and so I've only touched a little bit on 3, but wanted to just share a little bit of that insight and also share my excitement for things to come and passion for reconciliation, because I think we're going to see some amazing things come out. But I wanted to hold there to see if there's questions and then pass it off to Michelle, who's absolutely lovely.
Thanks, Christy. You can absolutely hear you're passionate about this. So thank you. We're going to open up. We have 5 minutes. So please come in, ask a question. We would love to hear from you, or even a comment. Zen, AKA Ken, put in the chat box. There's a resource toolkit he put in there that he's found, he's connected with. So you might want to take a look at that. Christy, where can we buy your book?
Amazon. Unfortunately.
No, I was like excited. I'm like, girl, you in Amazon?
Awesome. They actually, it's interesting. They actually kind of rule the world of book writing, and all the little ones are actually Amazon. So I've learned a lot. But if you have my information, my cell phone, my email, everything's on my book. Because I want to continue this dialogue, and I'm always open. You can link me on LinkedIn, or email me, or phone me, or text me and say, like, I just have this idea, or I have this question. And that's what it was about. The reason I wrote this book was change thought. It wasn't to, like, I don't know, do amazing, famous things. It was more to change the world and make it a better place. So by all means, you can reach out anytime.
Beautiful. I am going to Amazon right after this webinar to get your book. I'm really excited. There were some really good insights that you did share. As I said, you could really hear your passion for, reconciliation, but then our place as Indigenous people, like, we're growing, we're helping to grow this economy too. We're making really great contributions. So thank you so much. It doesn't appear that we have any questions. I'm going to say one more time. Anyone want to jump in with any questions, comments?
Jack Smith here. Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I busted protocol, didn't I?
Go for it, Jack.
Yeah, I'm so sorry I came in late. I had another meeting, and I had registered for this, and I thought, I want to hear this because the topic is near and dear to my heart. It's been my livelihood as well, working consultation and accommodation and referrals files on basically our side of the table. I'm Plains Cree from Ermineskin originally. And so, yeah, and did I say originally? I am from there. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Apparently that's where I was originally from, and still am. But I missed that part. So I was wondering if, do you record these, Danielle? Or or Michelle? So, yeah,
We
100%.
absolutely do. And then you can find it on the Can Do websites. So
right.
You have anything.
And Christy, I'm definitely going to be now after you, because I am an instructor. I'm a sessional instructor at University of Canada West, and I instruct students. I teach strategy and creating shared value and those kinds of things. But from my background, my perspective, working on our side of the table for 150 years, and so I'll be after you. I'm going to see if you're interested in doing a podcast with us. That would benefit all our students. Okay.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Awesome. I love when those connections are made and that networking happens. Awesome. Okay, Candace, last, we only have time for one more, so come on in.
Oh, I think you're muted.
Candace, you are muted, my friends. Maybe you want to put in the chat box. Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening when you go off and on. It's nothing happens. My apologies. As she's going to put her comment question in the chat box, I just want to remind everybody, this is the last Tuesday of Links to Learning. And so a draw will be made afterwards. All you need to do to get your name into this draw is to fill out that evaluation link that's going to be sent to you and check the prize out. It's a $500 Visa gift card. So you want to make sure you get your name into this draw because it's been a if I would be honest, it's been a quiet month here at Links to Learning. See, I'll have a good chance. So make sure because we feel like your voice, your evaluation, your feedback is really, really important. So please get those evaluations in. And we're just going to wait for Candace to enter her question. There you go. So check it out, Christy. Thank you. Very informative. Well, you and me both will be buying the book. The book is called, I just wrote it down, Weaving Two Worlds. She'll follow up with you. Awesome. Well,
yeah, absolutely. Feel free to reach out.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. I feel the love in this place. I feel warm. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We hope you have a good rest of the day. I hope you come back in November. And as we build our capacity, as we learn, as we engage, we have these important conversations. So we'll see you again. Be well and peace.